Thank you, Gabi, and a warm welcome to all of you to this Driving Action Towards a Climate Positive World event that we are holding here this afternoon. My name is Sonia, and I'm the CEO of Monday Nature, and have the pleasure to open this important event on behalf of the colleagues and friends from the SCeNe Coalition. Monday Nature is on the steering committee of the SCeNe Coalition, and we are a charitable conservation arm of the Monday Wildlife Group, which operates Singapore's world-class wildlife attractions. And for those of you that are not from Singapore, I hope you come and visit us while you're here in Singapore. We are also a proud member of the Temasek family, as we are jointly established by Temasek Trust and the Monday Wildlife Group. Monday Nature's mandate is to conserve biodiversity with a focus on protecting the most threatened Southeast Asian species from extinction. And to achieve this, we mainly work through strategic partnerships, of which the SCeNe Coalition is one important example. So why are we here today? Well, I'm sure now everybody is well aware that 2024 is a critical year to invoke a step-up change towards integrating efforts that can tackle the climate crisis. And with this event, we hope to highlight and discuss some of the much-needed climate action and solutioning. We heard a lot about the problems this morning. Now we want to talk about actions and solutions, which of course include the role of nature-based solutions and climate financing, but also the importance of building conservation capacity with the help of new innovative tools and approaches. I must admit, I'm not a climate expert, by no means. There's a lot of people in this room that probably know a lot more about climate change than me. I can talk about reticulated pythons, elephants, and rhinos, if you like, but that's not the topic for today. So therefore, I will leave it to the SCeNe Coalition colleagues, as well as the distinguished climate solutioning experts that we will hear from today, as well as our keynote speaker, Jennifer Morris, CEO of the Nature Conservancy, to lead the discussions of this important session today. And thank you, Jennifer, for being here. But I am a conservationist who started her career as a zoo and wildlife veterinarian here in Singapore over 20 years ago, and who has done enough ground-up firefighting in this region to understand that the massive crisis this planet is facing can only be tackled by breaking silos, forging strong and respectful collaborations across all relevant sectors and stakeholders. In the world of species conservation, and under the International Union for Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission, we call this actually the one plan approach, which ensures that when we create conservation action plans, we invite and consider all relevant stakeholders and use all tools in our toolbox. The Southeast Asia Climate and Nature-Based Solutions, or in short, SCeNe Coalition, is a fantastic example to demonstrate the power of true collaboration by merging and bringing together the various types of knowledge and expertise our respective organizations have to offer. The SCeNe Coalition is represented by 8 leading non-governmental organizations with an established presence in Southeast Asia. And I will name them now, and I will have to read it because it's so many of them. The Nature Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Society, BirdLife International, Conservation International, World Research Institute, Indonesia, WWF Singapore, the Sustainable Trade Initiative, IDH, and Monday Nature, of course. The SCeNe Coalition was created to accelerate and increase the implementation of and the investment in high-quality, high-integrity, triple-benefit, nature-based solutions across the region. In Southeast Asia alone, the Coalition has jointly over 1,000 staff delivering more than 200 conservation field projects. That's got to count for something. With many thanks to our donors and supporters, and especially Google, and I'm glad that Maya is here. Thank you so much for getting us started with this important coalition. And of course, the incredible commitment and that every one of the coalition member organizations have made. We have made tremendous progress over the last year in all our 3 work streams. We have launched the NBS tool at COP28, and Duri from WRI Indonesia is here today to share more about this fantastic innovation. We significantly progressed the development of the strategy, expertise, and operational processes for the NBS incubator, which aims to help frontline organizations in developing high-quality, high-integrity, triple-benefit NBS projects. This work stream is led by Prashan, who's part of Mandai Nature's team, and he's here also. And maybe, Prashan, you can raise your arm. And if you have any questions about the incubator, please talk to Prashan. And we are also in the final phase of launching the Coalition's guidance criteria for high-quality triple benefit NBS projects under our resource hub, and that's led by Colin Moore from WCS, who will be sharing with you shortly. The timing for this kind of work and collaboration could not be better, and I'd like to believe that this is just the beginning of a long, successful partnership among some of the top nature organizations of this world. We have built up a fantastic momentum, but our long-term success ultimately depends on more financial investment. It is now particularly important for us to find partners that are willing to invest in this important work and the collective strengths of our coalition, as we will certainly be able to help pave the way towards nature-positive future that we all dream of. Personally, I feel optimistic and inspired, especially by what I heard over the last 2 days, and I hope this event will be useful to you all, and that you will actively participate and help us to be even more impactful. With that, I would like to once again thank our current and future donors and supporters, the Philanthropy Asia Alliance for supporting this event with us, all guest speakers, and of course all of you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone, how you doing? I'm not going to use a podium because I'm extremely jet lagged. So I need to walk around, and I'm hoping this will be a little bit of an interactive session. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm really here at the invitation of Temasek Trust, and the entire team here has been so phenomenal. It's the first time I've actually been to Eco-Asperity, and I have to say I love coming to Singapore. The innovation, the entrepreneurship, is that a word? The excitement about really doing something different for the world just inspires me so much every time I come to visit here. So today we're here on Nature Day, which I was very happy to hear that Eco-Asperity is now having a Nature Day. And I think it's really emblematic of the change that we're seeing across the world in the climate discussion around the centrality of nature in the climate crisis. So many of you have heard this statistic, but for those of you that have not, actually I'm going to do it interactive. Who here knows what percentage of the climate crisis can be solved by nature? Don't be shy. Shout it out. 5%? 10? 80? Well, that's a lot. 30%. So 30%, a third, 33 and a third, more or less, of the solution for climate change has to come from nature. So what does that mean? That means that if we went net zero tomorrow, everyone was driving, eco-friendly cars around the world, every single unit of energy that we produce was coming from renewable energy, and we don't address the fact of what we're doing to nature in terms of land use change and emissions coming from nature, we will never solve the climate crisis. So nature is absolutely essential, but we often don't think about nature as a solution. We often call it the forgotten solution. And why is that? There are many reasons. One, as humans, we love technology, right? We often forget that some of the most important technology on the planet has been developed over millions of years, and that is Mother Nature. So when we look at a tree, when we look at a river, when we look at carbon, we often don't think about nature as the technology that we should be saving. And I think that's why it's so important that we're here today to discuss this. And the SCeNe Coalition is incredibly inspiring. And I will just share a couple reasons why. Number one, it's organizations that, let's be honest, often compete, sitting down and working together for a common goal. That is huge. And I'm involved in several coalitions, and I just want to say that having these 8 organizations in this region focusing on addressing the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, many of you probably know this statistic as well, but Southeast Asia has lost 55% of its natural capital in the last 50 years. So in order to address both climate and biodiversity loss, it comes to nature-based solutions, and that's what's so exciting. Now, The other piece that I love about the SCeNe Coalition is that it's a practical, analytical policy tool and investment tool. So when you're thinking about, gosh, this whole new world of nature, where do I put my money? Where's going to be the best return on investment for both carbon, for my investors, and of course for biodiversity, it's sometimes quite daunting. So this NBS tool, this nature-based solutions tool that was just mentioned, which I've had a chance to explore, is really, it's a dramatic shift. It enables us to actually go into a map, an interactive map, and determine where we should be putting our money in a different place throughout Southeast Asia. So this tool is just being piloted. It's going to be used by policymakers and by companies to really analytically use every single dollar in the most cost-efficient way. And that's so essential now more than ever as we think about all the challenges that we have on the planet today. So I think that as we get into this discussion, I'm really excited that so many of my colleagues, and for those of you who don't know, I was at Conservation International for 23 years, and my husband worked for WWF, and so we have so many ties into this community. I'm a huge fan of all the organizations that are here, and really love, again, that we are rolling up our sleeves and trying to address what is one of the most fundamental challenges on planet Earth today, and that is, of course, the loss of nature, and of course the loss of what we often call irrecoverable carbon, or carbon that we're losing that we can never actually get back. So it's especially here in this region, we have to protect these ecosystems, and doing it through an analytical tool like the NBS tool that we have, but also thinking about the accelerator. I think that's another really important part of the SCeNe Coalition's value proposition, quite frankly, is how do we develop those lists of practices. Again, this is a relatively new marketplace. So having a list that's been sort of verified by these organizations that says, this is a good project, this is what good looks like. That's often missing in this sector. I mean, as we think about the carbon markets and all of the challenges that many of you have heard in the carbon markets, this will enable us to say, these organizations agree that these are excellent projects to put your money behind. And I just want to reflect on a story, and I mentioned this if you were in the plenary this morning, but you know, we often forget in the controversy around carbon markets the importance of this money when it hits the ground. So I was in Kenya a few weeks ago. I was in a plane. I was flying over this part of Kenya that's very remote, very poor, really out of sight of most government services. And the person in the plane with me said, "Look down, Jennifer. Do you see that school? Carbon built that school. This community has tried tourism, it hasn't worked. They've tried so many things. This health clinic, carbon built that health clinic." And I think remembering that story and remembering the difference that carbon markets are making in people's lives and telling that story is so important. And there's stories like this all over the world, that many of the organizations in the room are developing these types of initiatives. We as a community, everyone in this room needs to do a much better job telling those success stories, because we have to get ahead of that narrative. We have to make sure that our carbon credits are best in class, both on the supply side and that the companies using them are going down the emissions curve as fast as possible. And when they can't go any further, they're able to use high quality offsets. So these are all of just, I think, really important things. I love what the SCeNe Coalition is doing, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go in the years ahead. So thank you so much for having me here today, and look forward to the conversation.
All right, so that leads us into our next session. Again, Jennifer, thank you so much for those inspiring words, and I do hope everyone could feel, I think, really where that inspiration is from, especially with regards to carbon and how that could help local communities. So in our next session, we are going to move on to impact solutioning. We have 4 guest speakers for you today, and I'm going to start by introducing each one at the start of their session. And just a reminder again that these are going to be about 10-minute presentations followed by a 5-minute Q&A session. Please submit your questions during the presentations using the QR code that will be available to you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Cheryl Fofaria from UBS and invite her to come give her presentation today. She's the head of social impact and philanthropy for Southeast Asia.
Thank you so much. And gosh, what a wonderfully energetic and inspiring keynote by Jennifer. I actually really confess I don't believe you when you said you were jet lagged, because that was too much energy and a very tough act to follow. Thank you everyone for taking the time. I suppose really what I wanted to do, I've been asked to speak about impact solutions. And it's not always obvious kind of what a bank would be doing in the climate space, and I suppose kind of the natural assumption is probably, okay, they're going to be doing some stuff on their ESG reports, etc. And what I'm delighted to say is that UBS actually have taken a very proactive stance on a lot of impact fronts. Maybe I'll just test this to see, there we go. On a lot of impact fronts, including, of course, climate and the environment as a huge pillar, but also actually traditionally in education and health, using a lot of different modus operandi of grants, of social finance, of collectives, and all with the aim of building this very transformative, scalable impact that we need to see to fulfill the UN SDGs. Really what this has meant for us is kind of, there's a team of about 150 of us around the world, present in 9 locations, and we work with our clients to find and fund high impact solutions using a variety of different methods, which I'll go into. And I think for us, the climate portfolio is actually relatively young. The foundation has been alive for sort of 25 years or so, and the climate environment strategy was only really started in 2021. But regardless of how young it is, it has now grown to about 86 million or so grants under management, going to about 50-ish grantees, so probably very much our fastest portfolio growing globally. And that is absolutely sort of fit for the scale of the challenge. It takes a very holistic approach, investing in climate mitigation and adaptation to support resilient livelihoods, enhance food security, and improve conservation and biodiversity. They all go hand in hand. The key question that we always find ourselves grappling with is just, what does success look like in the next 5 to 10 years for each of these portfolios? For our sustainable land use portfolio, we want to see landscape restoration on a large scale and conservation, and a global transition to regenerative and climate-smart agriculture and agroforestry practices. From our marine and coastal ecosystems, we want to see improved policy and evidence around the blue carbon markets. We want to see more sustainable coastal marine enterprises and more sustainable fishing, and actually also newly enhanced sort of gender equity within coastal communities. So now that we have this kind of macro picture in mind, just want to give you a few concrete, tangible examples of the different types of solutions that we, sort of really love working on, all of you in the room, but we're trying to really sort of build in this idea of kind of problem first, tool second. There's a variety of different stuff we can do. How can we kind of bring it to life, but using the right structure, the right pathway for the right problem? So of course, the first kind of most traditional sort of modality that we're using is grants. And we're delighted to partner with the SCeNe coalition with respect to their nature-based solution incubator. We've got a very significant focus on NBS because we feel it can deliver significant climate mitigation and very robust social outcomes at the same time. So they're really looking at supporting evidence building, so crucially needed for this sector, advocacy and policy interventions, which of course actually can be quite unpopular sometimes amongst the funder community, but very happy to support those. And crucially, finance. So really we're interested in catalyzing large-scale investment by piloting innovative social financing mechanisms, which are becoming an increasingly large part of our work in general. And we're super confident, very excited to partner with the SCeNe Coalition, many of you in the room. We're super excited and confident that they will provide the ecosystem with very high quality NBS projects that will measurably sort of benefit climate, people, and nature. Solution number 2 Social finance, and if I say anything wrong, then I'm going to point over to my colleague Dun, who is here in the room and engaged in this transaction. But we were so delighted to kind of work with Blue Alliance, to whom and this comes down to that notion of problem first, tool second, but we have given both a grant and an impact loan to them. It's an incredible organization whose main purpose is to protect marine life through MPAs, marine protected areas in the Philippines. But they have developed income streams from ecotourism and reef-positive businesses and blue carbon credits. So the grant really excitingly enables them to experiment with eDNA monitoring of biodiversity in water. And I don't know how many of you may have now been on the Ocean X Explorer, but it was fascinating to see those tanks that can go down, 6,000 meters underwater and do that eDNA measurement. Whilst the impact loan is repaid through the revenue streams that we just talked about, has an interest rate between 0 and 10%, but basically that interest rate goes up and down depending on the impact metrics. So things like ecosystem integrity or species protection, livelihoods, including job creation and gender equality, a really, really exciting way to scale up the finance so desperately needed in some of these locations in Southeast Asia. And then the final one, which I'm super excited about, is really the Climate Collective. This started a few years ago with some really brilliant early supporters, many of whom are in this room, but it's a story of true collaboration, bringing together on the one hand philanthropists and impact investors who are very passionate about moving the needle on climate issues, and on the other hand, best-in-class impact organizations and experts, all driving towards the same shared ambition and goal and mission of catalyzing the blue carbon markets in Southeast Asia. So those who have joined our Climate Collective pool their philanthropic capital and go on a 2-year learning experience with us together, including visiting the projects on the ground that they have funded in beautiful, gorgeous settings like the Mekong Delta in Vietnam, where we were last year, journeying with 8 families, some of whom had brought their next gen along, who are now, I just got an email last week from one of them, and she said, I'm actually working on a climate solution at school. Can I please interview you for this? And I thought that was amazing. She'd been inspired by her visit to Vietnam. So where is all this pooled funding going? In short, it's really going to a coalition of organizations, all of whom have a very key role to play in solving this uber problem. Why mangroves? Why did we choose mangroves? Because of course they are highly effective, sort of super powerful beings in terms of sequestering carbon, and they're hotspots for biodiversity, and they have huge economic and societal value because millions of people around the world rely directly on them for food, for wood, for income, from fishing, tourism, etc. And why Southeast Asia? I think Jennifer painted it beautifully. It's easy. It's home to the biggest stock of blue carbon in the world, 35% of that total 18 million hectares of global mangrove forest. The reason I love this collective is because, as we all know, this problem is so multi-rooted and it's multi-stakeholder and it's complex and it's hard. And you just know one party can solve it alone, and through the collective we've been able to incentivize that collective action on behalf of the funders, but also crucially on behalf of the impact organizations who are now working together on building solutions. That's phase 2 really, is to try and incentivize that through the collective. So I will sort of stop here, but really appreciate the time, the partnership from TNC, from others in the SCeNe Coalition, and happy to take some questions or to pass the baton on.
Okay, so this takes us into our 5-minute Q&A. Did you want to keep the podium or?
Oh,
yeah.
I can
pass you the mic.
Sure.
As some of the questions start to come in, I also have a few questions as well I'd like to start with. So with respect to the collective solution number 3 you mentioned, why do you think a collaborative approach is needed, and what are some key results you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just so overwhelmingly complex, and I think, when we work with philanthropists, it's sort of easy for everybody to imagine what a good outcome kind of looks like and how to maybe even drive that within education or health, because we sort of experience it and feel it all the time. It's a little bit more tangible. In climate, we find that actually, the problem is so complex and massive and multi-rooted and too many people involved, and there is this feeling of kind of defeatism often, that we just need to move towards optimism, and some of that optimism comes from doing things together to address a problem in also a very collective way that is able to sort of build more collective influence in some of the parts than you would if you were alone trying to address one particular problem in one particular region. So we love that about it, and I think, sort of as I sort of started to allude to, the next phase for us, a very exciting one, is really to think about how can we incentivize the partnerships needed within these impact organizations and build more of them into the collective, so that we can really find a more outsized impact and influence that can go way beyond the impact organizations just in this collective.
All right, fantastic. A few other questions have come in to see how much time we have, but what do you see are the biggest challenges to scale?
Oh my gosh, I wish I had been a climate specialist here. There's so many issues with trying to find scale, and we are kind of at the foundation also very obsessed with trying to find scale. I suppose the thing that we feel we can contribute to finding scale, rather than kind of pointing out the problems, is really trying to attract commercial capital into this sector in a way that ordinarily may not have come in. So we have taken quite a big bet strategically. We will continue to do so in the coming years on blended finance, because we believe that is, sort of a key way that we can bring different types of capital into the mix, sort of using each one of those different types of capital to their highest power, their highest purpose, giving different investors what they need, but bringing scale of financing to these brilliant solutions.
All right. And a couple more questions here, but I think we'll only have time for one more. With such a wide spectrum of available tools, how does UBS allocate resources to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we sort of have teams who are dedicated and focused in different areas. But broadly speaking, there are many organizations that we've used a variety of tools with for the one organization. There's one in particular in Kenya, which is close to my heart because I'm from Kenya. But, there we gave them a grant when they were a small sort of, one hospital kind of player and non-profit. And then we gave them an impact loan when they were ready. And we're now sort of embarking on the equity journey because, again, they are ready for that sort of jump in the capital stack. So I do think it comes down to sort of looking at that problem first and the tool second. And when you can go with a journey on a with an organization on a multi-year journey with different types of capital, bringing different types of investor and funder to the mix, different types of expertise, it's a much more powerful relationship.
Okay. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I think that's all the time we have for today.
Thank you.
So next I'd like to invite Jan Yoshioka to come up. Jan is the Vice President of Sustainable Finance for Asia Pacific for the Conservation International.
Thanks, Gabby. And also I can use these. Okay. This is the clicker. Yes. Okay. Thanks, Gabby. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something that, building off of what Cheryl said, I think is an opportunity that CI, Conservation International, has been exploring in terms of really thinking about the ways we finance nature conservation, and including carbon markets and nature-based solutions. So there's some interesting statistics here from the Asia-Pacific region. This region is home to 18% of global tropical forest cover, half of the world's mangroves, and 77% of the coral reefs. This region is home to the highest levels of marine biodiversity on the planet and roughly half of the world's biodiversity hotspots. Thank you. This immense natural capital and biodiversity underpins a large proportion of Asia-Pacific's economic value. It's estimated that between 54 and 63% of regional GDP is either moderately or highly dependent on nature. Despite this importance, our region is also facing some of the highest rates of tropical deforestation and significant mangrove and coral loss. If we don't reverse these trends, roughly 42% of species could be lost by the turn of the century. Here in the region, we have strong potential to maximize the role of nature-based solutions in solving these issues. This region contains 1/3 of the world's investable forest carbon and 78% of the financially viable blue carbon systems on the planet. We also have been successful in mobilizing financing from the carbon markets for these solutions. In 2022, the Asia-Pacific accounted for 29% of forestry and land use credits in the voluntary markets. Although carbon markets represent an important source of nature financing and for addressing the dual climate and biodiversity crises, this is just a fraction of the 1.6 trillion in nature-positive business opportunities in the land and ocean sectors that have been identified in a recent Temasek report. For more than 30 years, CI has been bringing a diverse range of financing tools and investment strategies to advance conservation, including nature-based solutions financed through the carbon markets, as well as nature-positive impact investments through our CI Ventures Fund. So in the next few slides, I'll be talking about some examples from around the world, both here in the Asia-Pacific and in sub-Saharan Africa, where we're starting to combine these different strategies for financing nature outcomes. One example of this multi-pronged strategy is found in Southeast Asia. The Kruger to Canyons Rangeland Restoration Project focuses on working with traditional livestock farmers to conserve and restore soil carbon in communal rangelands. By working with traditional herders and livestock farmers to improve grazing practices, this project enables the recovery of native ground cover, allowing healthy soils to rebuild. Shifting these practices will enable more than 115,000 tons of CO2 sequestration annually, while improving the quality and availability of natural fodder for cattle. This is estimated to generate over 100 million in carbon financing over the next 30 years, while providing livelihoods and income opportunities for communal farmers. Beyond the carbon financing, CI invested in sustainable cattle value chains through CI Ventures in a company called Meat Naturally, which is providing mobile auctions to expand market access for climate-resilient beef, and certified mobile abattoirs to enable value-added production, both of which enhance farmers' incomes. Here in Southeast Asia, we are pioneering a new model for climate-smart shrimp, which incentivizes mangrove restoration while improving shrimp production practices. Many of us have heard the statistic that here in Southeast Asia, aquaculture has been the leading historical driver of mangrove deforestation, accounting for roughly 1/3 of mangrove loss in our region. With sustained growth in global shrimp demand, many Southeast Asians have set ambitious targets for year-on-year shrimp production growth. In Indonesia alone, 93% of active shrimp ponds are considered traditional or extensive. These are low input but also low productivity systems, which are unlikely to meet the government's ambitions to increase shrimp exports by 250% using the same production footprint. At the same time, the government has reported that there are about 300,000 hectares of abandoned or idle shrimp farms, most of which are in former mangrove habitat. The CI Climate Smart Shrimp Project seeks to maximize the restoration of mangroves in abandoned and fallow ponds while promoting responsible intensification of shrimp production on active farmland to increase the restoration potential of these land holdings. Mangrove restoration in just half of the abandoned ponds could sequester an estimated 5.78 million tons of carbon annually, and responsibly intensifying just 30% of these low productivity ponds could make an additional 100,000 hectares available for restoration and unlock 3.7 million tons of mitigation benefit without reducing production yields. This year we'll be launching our first climate smart shrimp pilot in Indonesia together with Indonesian tech startup Jala. This investment will enable Jala to deploy its precision aquaculture technologies and also ensure that increasing shrimp yields is done in an environmentally sustainable way. and to measure the ecological benefits of restoration and rehabilitation in mangroves on farmland. The results of this pilot will be used to inform the design of a climate-smart shrimp financing facility that will provide farmers access to low-cost financing to responsibly intensify their farms while committing to on-farm protection and restoration of mangroves. These examples are just a few of the ways in which we think that crowding in different forms of capital and finding ways to invest in nature beyond the carbon markets can really help to accelerate these solutions across Southeast Asia. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. So I think as some of the questions just start to roll in on the QR code, I can start with one of my own. So what are some of the key opportunities for or barriers to scaling nature climate solutions or nature-based solutions in the Asia-Pacific region that impact investment and could play a role that could play a role in addressing?
Yeah, I mean, I think coming back to that statistic of the 1.6 trillion in sort of business opportunities that could build nature-positive economies, only a fraction of that is sort of represented by the carbon markets. So while that's an important source of nature financing, we need to come up with different strategies. And part of that is investments by corporates into supply chains to really figure out how we transition towards more nature-positive behaviors. But also, it's thinking about ways in which venture capital and other types of financing can actually help with that transition. I think when we look at the maps of where irrecoverable carbon or other carbon opportunities are, particularly in mangrove and blue carbon ecosystems, because of the way that carbon methodologies are, there's only a fraction of those systems that can actually be addressed by carbon markets today under current methodologies. So really thinking about how do we think about the broader set of benefits that systems like mangroves and seagrass provide that can be invested into by other forms of money is really sort of what we think is part of the bigger solution to finance that sort of nature-based solutions and nature outcomes.
We have a couple more questions here. How are the communities involved in the pilot test, and what was the strategy to get them to understand carbon markets?
For the climate smart shrimp?
Yes, I believe that's what it's referring to.
Yeah, so I think really, it's a lot to do with the partner that we chose. So Jala has been, an amazing company, a very high growth tech startup in Indonesia. They've been working with thousands of farmers across Indonesia, most of them who are smallholders, to really identify sort of what these bottlenecks are. So a lot of these sort of traditional shrimp farmers have not been able to sort of fully maximize the yields from their farms. At the same time, I think, working with Jala, who is a sustainable technology provider, they've seen sort of the interest and sort of the demand for us to be able to do nature restoration alongside sustainable intensification of shrimp. So through their networks, through the Indonesian Shrimp Club, we've been sort of identifying different landowners, different concession holders, most of them small holders and small scale operators, to be able to say, where could we do this? Where are we seeing sort of low productivity on parts of the farm? Where can we sort of bring in technology, bring in investment to be able to facilitate this? And interestingly, we've been seeing a lot of demand for us to be able, through CI Ventures and through sort of work with partners, to finance that transition towards, responsible intensification in exchange for, committing to mangrove protection and mangrove restoration goals. So I think there's been a lot of community-driven perspective in terms of the design, what will work, what won't, because we came in with a thesis, we thought, okay, this would be great if it worked, and really, partners like Jala, working with local governments at the Regency and provincial level, we've been able to identify folks who are really on this journey with us and really thinking about how we design those solutions, in a really organic and bottom-up way.
Thank you. And I think time for just one more question. What are other ways in which private funders across the spectrum of capital, from philanthropy to commercial finance, can support the acceleration of nature climate solutions, nature-based solutions in the region?
Yeah. Some of these interventions, even though maybe in their component parts might be proven, these are still really risky propositions, right? We're working in marginalized communities, we're working with topic areas that sometimes, have not been tried or tested before. And so I think there's been a huge need for traditional philanthropy from traditional grants from government to really lay the foundation and provide sort of that very, very high risk tolerant money to be able to actually test and pilot these solutions. I think for us, through our CI Ventures vehicle, which is a return-seeking impact investment platform, we're trying to say, how do we go to that next stage? So where there's the absorptive capacity for that type of money, how do we invest those proceeds? And then in the future, to Cheryl's point, how do we then in the future use those demonstrated models to crowd in commercial capital? Because that's really, I think, in the case of sustainable production for cattle and for shrimp, that's really, really part of the bigger solution and sort of the bigger mainstreaming of what we need to be able to do.
Excellent. Sorry, guys, we don't have any time for any more. But I do just want to announce that we are going to be taking a quick break in between now, about 5 minutes, before our next two guest speakers come and take the stage. So I'll come back in 5 minutes and let you all know when we're starting again. Okay, we're going to continue with part 2 of our impact solutioning session. So I just would like everyone to take their seats, and I'm going to invite up Colin Moore. He's the Regional Carbon Advisor for the Wildlife Conservation Society, and he's also the lead for our NBS portfolio work stream for the SCeNe Coalition. Yep. Colin?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. As Gabby just said, my name is Colin Moore, the Regional Carbon Advisor for the Wildlife Conservation Society and one of the members of the SCeNe Coalition working on the portfolio stream. So we heard a bit of an introduction earlier about the SCeNe Coalition, which stands for the Southeast Asia Climate and Nature-Based Solutions Coalition. This is a collective, a coalition of 8 different leading environmental and conservation organizations, all of whom have a long-standing presence here in the region, working at the intersection of climate, rural livelihoods, and conservation. We have a strong field-based presence and a very strong practical experience when it comes to working on nature and conservation. We heard earlier about the critical importance of nature-based solutions and the role that they can play on our pathway to a 1.5 degree world. And the coalition came together because we really believe that we have something to say, something to offer in trying to catalyze this space and ensuring that there are more high-quality, triple-benefit NBS projects in the region. The aims of the, the coalition are listed here. Primarily, this is about coming together to scale this sector, to work with many of those frontline organizations that operate in this region, are doing good work, but are struggling to access this space. So it's about scaling those projects from the ground up and delivering high-quality triple benefit. The SCeNe Coalition's theory of change is predicated on the belief that high-quality triple benefit NBS is now stymied by a lack of adequate information on existing high-quality projects, their design and development pathways, as well as sufficient capacities to build out those projects. This is why the coalition is built around 3 pillars, which are listed here. The NBS tool, which we'll hear more about from my colleague Dewi shortly, which aims to help projects assess their potential and give them the data they need to determine feasibility and therefore from there approach sources of funding. The NBS incubator, which will provide early stage projects with the resources and capacities required to embark upon project development. And then finally the portfolio, which is to helping define what high quality means, provide concrete examples of high quality projects and their development pathways. And this is what I'd like to talk a little bit more about with you today, is the work of this portfolio, specifically our work on developing some high quality criteria. I think what's important to note is the work of these 3 work streams are all interconnected. Okay, so the work of the portfolio to define high quality helps the NBS tool to then integrate that in its identification of high quality projects. The NBS tool is very much a conduit to assess feasibility that can then move over to the NBS incubator and then really develop these projects. We heard a little bit earlier about some of the challenges the carbon markets have experienced, especially an NBS projects or even RED projects within that. This primarily comes down to criticism or skepticism around the quality or the integrity of supply, i.e. the projects that are being developed, and the claims that they're making around their climate impact, biodiversity, social. Are they really delivering those claims? Or at the other end, we have integrity of demand, which is where the corporates are making claims around carbon reductions. Are those claims valid? And are they using offsets in a way that supports a longer-term transition to decarbonization? To help with these questions around integrity, there are a number of initiatives that have emerged that you may be familiar with. At the side, on the supply side, and specifically when we're looking at standards, we have two of the more common standards that are used in the marketplace for NBS projects, i.e. the VCS and the CCB standards. Working alongside those has been a lot of the work of the ICVCM. This is to ensure that the ICVCM is developing guidance, protocols, processes to assess, to make sure that these standards are actually delivering on their claims. This is very much focused on standards and on supply. On the other end, there's guidance being issued by the VCMI, the TFCI, the Natural Climate Solutions Alliance. And this guidance is directed very much towards the corporates and ensuring that the corporate claims can be believed in, and that any of the investments that are made in carbon credits or in specifically forest projects, there's guidance on what high quality is. Where the SCeNe Coalition seeks to make its presence, to add value to this space, is to develop guidance for project developers to achieve high quality and to meet the requirements of these standards. This is where there's a critical gap right now in the space, and somewhere where we believe, as conservation practitioners on the ground, have something of value to offer. We're doing this primarily at this stage through the development of a series of high quality criteria. And these are currently in development. It's an iterative process, working with the members, all the members of the coalition. And as I mentioned, leveraging that collective experience on what it means to do these projects on the ground. So far, we have a draft of 6 criteria across 3 major themes: nature, people, and carbon. At the highest levels, and this is just a kind of a peek into the types of considerations within those criteria, these are not too different from other existing guidance that is out there. But that's not where we've stopped. What the coalition has done from here is to build out a number of sub-criteria, and are also developing a tiering system that gives project developers guidance on how they may pass from good to exceptional levels of quality. This is something that's missing in the market, is both an articulation of what progressive levels of quality look like, but also how projects may pass from an acceptable level to increasing levels of quality. And this here is kind of a graphic representation of what, at a sub-criterion level, the coalition is developing. So what this does is it provides a basis for project developers to understand what needs to be put in place across multiple dimensions of project development, from setting your baseline condition to the types of things that must be analyzed, assessed, monitored, and adapted to over the course of project implementation, the types of ways the project needs to plan and implement activities, as well as then suggested outcomes for each one. And this starts with good, which primarily aligns with the requirements of existing standards, but then there are levels beyond that. Again, the idea here is not to give a yay-nay consideration to a project, but to offer them a pathway to increase quality over time. And just to give a set, now today I'm not presenting those criteria, these are not finalized, these will be ready in a few months' time, so I hope to be able to present those to you again shortly. But the intent here is to show the process we're going through and what the outcome will be. When it comes to, for example, when it comes across like community dimensions, how does one go from good to exceptional? Here what we're looking at is, for example, in the delivery of community benefits, you go from a generalized delivery of a community benefit to increasingly granular delivery of those benefits across multiple community groups, even within a community. When it comes to your monitoring approaches and the frequency, that will become more frequent, and you can reintegrate that into your project and project design. And so these are the types of additive levels of quality that we're looking to build as part of this, the work of the coalition. So once we've developed these criteria, we will be around this developing a number of other additional resources, case studies, additional guidance documents, as well as profiling a number of different projects in the NBS tool to bring these criteria to life and really support projects and project developers to be able to understand and internalize these criteria in their own projects. So I do look forward to, in a few months' time, coming up here at a future event and telling you more about these criteria. For now, it's just a sneak peek into some of the work of the coalition. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin, for that. As the questions start to come in, I'll just start off with one of my own. So how will the developers be able to make use of these criteria going forward? And what sorts of support will they receive?
Right, so the criteria themselves are going to be, with all these implementation materials, be quite dense and something that will be important for the developers to read. But like I said, we want to try and bring these to life as well with real tangible examples from other existing projects. So through the case studies, through the online portal, developers will be able to go in and understand, okay, this is how a project actually did this. This is practically how they did it, as opposed to what can be quite dry language in the depths of criteria and sub-criteria that are out there. So that's going to be one resource that the coalition will be providing. The other then is the work of the incubator itself, right? So this is going to take those criteria and support with additional support from our colleague Prashant and his work of actually direct support to those projects and integrating these criteria into their project design and implementation.
This is kind of a related question, but how will we keep this guidance simple for developers and get the word out to everyone that needs to hear it?
So achieving the right level of specificity and complexity whilst also making it accessible has been an incredible challenge of the coalition so far. So besides the language, we are looking to build out kind of diagrammatically for the developers how this guidance can be applied. And I think, again, it's going to be bringing it to life that will help to kind of actually simplify it in many respects.
Okay, got several more questions here. I think we might have time for a couple more. How can high integrity of demand manifest into higher mobilization of funds?
Say again, how?
So how can high integrity of demand manifest into higher mobilization of funds towards those projects?
Well, we are hoping that these criteria will also influence demand, okay? And I mean, the need for the projects is obviously without question. And we're hoping that through these criteria, in being able to articulate higher quality, that the projects are more durable, is not just going to translate into higher demand, but then, like I said, the longer term durability of the projects, that I think then will give credibility to the sector and eventually enable the sector to scale and create more, in turn, create more demand.
I think time for one more question. Will the criteria be shared also with the verifiers or the standards and other actors in the chart shown before?
So absolutely. We do anticipate using these criteria as a way to, almost like as an advocacy tool, to bring to the CCB, to the VCS and others for consideration in their own iteration of their standards, something that does continuously happen. And we expect to use those criteria and our experience to then advocate for stronger and better levels of quality.
Yes, I don't think we have time for one more, so I'll just end it here. Thank you so much, Colin.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I'd like to invite our last guest speaker of today, last but not least, Ms. Dewi Sari, who is the NBS manager for the World Resources Institute Indonesia. And she's also the lead, for our NBS tool work stream under the SCeNe coalition. Dewi?
Thank you, Gaby. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Dewi from World Resources Institute. I'm going to walk here not because I'm jet lagged, but because I'm so excited to share more about the NBS tool with you all. So yeah, as mentioned previously by Jennifer and also by other colleagues, SCeNe Coalition has one tool that is developed through a support from google.org. In this tool, we built this tool to specifically support frontline organization to actually develop high-quality triple benefit carbon projects. Who are frontline organizations? Frontline organizations are local NGO, community groups, or those who work on the ground directly protecting ecosystem habitats across Southeast Asia. And why we built this tool? As mentioned by previous speakers, there are expected huge demand of carbon credit coming in Southeast Asia and also around the world, but it expected to exceed the supply. That's one problem. Another problem is that very rare of these projects are being developed by or led by local NGO community groups who directly work on the ground to protect or restore the forest, because they have so many challenges, and the challenge could be coming from, the complexity of the standard itself. As you might aware, you might see the carbon standard. It's very complex. It's require a lot of data, require a lot of project documentation, which many local organization doesn't have enough capacity to access the data, to access the, funding exercise and anything else. That's why, with NBS tool, we are aiming to address this challenge. We are providing data, information, and also helping them to generate this complex project documentation in order to support them with the feasibility analysis, so then they can get better funding, but also they can get better capacity using this tool. And what are the key functionality of the tools? Right now, we have three main functionality. So the first one is interactive map. In interactive map, we provide data to help user analyze spatial data and then export this data so then they can use this data to produce a map, to produce documentation as well. And the second one is data analyzer, where in this feature, user could actually generate data about biodiversity, about climate data, the calculation of the carbon, but also generate the social data. Who are the people living there? And with these data analyzers, we not only compiling the data, but also we put the data directly into the certain carbon project standard that we have right now. But at the same time, like I mentioned, one of the challenges, they don't have capacity to actually manage their data. That's why we have project management features that help them to actually manage their data, manage their documentation, so then they can access it easily. This is just a quick look about the tools. The link of the tool is nbstool.scenecoalition.org. If you have time right now and you want to check the tools, you can go through that link. And this is interactive map that I mentioned before, where we showcase some of the spatial data layers to the users about biodiversity, data, nature, or nature, people, or climate data. And next one is project documentation documents. Right now we have general template and CCB template. We pull out the template together in the tools because the user doesn't know how to put their data together. So the tools helping them to store the data together and then generate the documentation right away. So it's filled the data that we have directly into certain type of carbon project documentation. And the last one, this is mentioned by Colin previously. Once the criteria ready, we will showcase the criteria, and this is going to help not only frontline organization, but also philanthropic investor and other decision maker to actually visualize the data, and then also seeing what our high quality projects looks like. And this is just a prototype at the moment. Once the criteria are ready, we will put it live in the tools as well, so then everyone can see the criteria easily. And since we launched the NBS tool at COP last year, we gained more than 1,500 unique users. Because of we are, prioritize the privacy of users, any users that just want to download the data and also want to see the polygons, what are potential impact of climate, nature, and people, they don't need to log in, they don't need to register, because we want the tool to be available for anyone who needs the data. But then, if they want to generate more documentation and also learn more about the data, they need to register. And those who are registered and right now become an active users is 35 users coming from 26 organizations across Southeast Asia. In order to improve this version 1, we engage and select the active users that is currently use the tool to actually gain their insight, how they have been using the tool since the last 4 months, because the tools just launched in December, meaning that we already live for 4 months. So how they have been using the tools, how they use the tools in solving their problems in the ground. And this is what they say about the tools. So Organization A, based in South Sumatra in Indonesia, they mainly focus on empowering indigenous people and local community to get the tenurial right to protect their remaining forests. They said that beyond developing NBS project, NBS tool could help people to actually develop the social forestry documentation. And also another users in Mindanao in the Philippines said that they could actually use this tool to develop or updates their ancestral domain sustainable land protection plan that is actually the right giving for indigenous people in the Philippines to manage land or forest, and also provide access for IPNLC to utilize remote sensing data in easy way. And another users, Organization C, they said that because as I mentioned before, many of users doesn't have enough storage and data management platform for them to store their biodiversity and also social economic data. So they said that the project management features in the tools could help them to store and integrate. And also, if many users are using that, we could enhance the availability of biodiversity and social economic data, but at the same time increasing the data accuracy as well. Because of so many inputs coming in from our current users, giving the numbers, it looks small, but if this user developing the project, it could help to develop more than 30 projects across the region, which is already quite huge. And we are going to improve the tools through a consultation with our users. This is our tool development roadmap until 2026. And this development will be divided into 4 types of categories. So the first one is actually the develop new special layers. As you might see in the tools right now, many of the layers are still global data layers. So we need to develop the data layers that is specifically for Southeast Asia. And of course, because the data, some of the data are remote sensing data that is model, we aim to use some machine learning model and AI to improve this accuracy as well. And of course, improving the country's data layer, where we are trying to collect more social economic data layers and make it standardized so that we can compare between countries within the region. And of course, improve the project management features. We are aiming to continuously conduct user testing and integrating AI in the project documentation generation. And the last one, of course, improve the system and infrastructures to reduce the processing time, but at the same time, improve data and system security. So that's where the NBS tool right now. We are looking forward to collaborate and also to discuss with you all how this tool could be improved to address your challenge, but at the same time to support local organizations in developing their project in this region. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dewi. So we already have a few questions that have come in during your talk. So this first one here, could you explain how does NBS, or how does the tool, help indigenous peoples and local communities get tenure right in protection of their forests?
Explain more?
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the users in the Philippines, they said that they have been supporting indigenous people to get the ancestral domain right. And in order to get that right, the indigenous people need to develop certain type of documentation. And in order to develop this documentation, they need to prove how this area could actually benefit them as a community, but also benefit nature and biodiversity, but also could generate potential positive impact for climate. And because of this complexity, this organization told us that the tools could help to collect this data and to fill in this template easily. So then the indigenous people doesn't have to, do using their own analysis to complete this documentation. But right now, since we hear that input, right now we are trying to get the standard or the documentation standard that this country is using and embed it in the tools and then put it to and then allow the users to directly choose that standard once they draw their polygon, and then they choose that standard, and then the tools will pulling out this information together and fill it that standard. So that's one thing. And another thing is also in Indonesia, social forestry is one of the pathway allowing local community and indigenous people to manage the forest. And in order to get that right, they need to also develop certain type of documentation. We are planning to also put this documentation standard into the tools. Because right now, if you see the tools, the standard that we put in there, only carbon project standard, which is CCB template, but not all this documentation yet. We are still on the processing to incorporate that because we just got that feedback from our user just within this couple months.
Awesome. And another question here on who owns the data that is submitted by the users?
So the data, we have 3 types of data. So the first one is actually remote sensing data, where it's available in publics, and then we use some scientific method that is published and recognized by scientists and put it in the tools and then show the data. That's one type of data. The second one is actually country-based data, where we compile some social economic data from each country that is published obviously by the government. And we put that data, so then the data could help to generate this project documentation. And then the third data is actually the data that is submitted by users. So this data is owned and only accessible by these users, unless they are allowing us to store this data by SCeNe Coalition and to share it. Once you register to be a user, you need to select the privacy policy. There is 3 levels of privacy policy. So the first one is actually they don't allow us to do anything with their own data. The second one is that they allow us to store the data but not to do any analysis. And the third one is to store and use their data to improve some data accuracy. So it depends on the users, how they want us to do with their data.
Excellent. I don't think we have enough time for another question, so sorry to those whose questions we couldn't get to today. So Dewi, thank you again